to PDC, I would just like to make everybody aware that the meeting is being recorded. I'll pass over to the chair now to go through the formal part of the agenda.
Thank you, Sam. Can I ask everybody to mute their mics? If they wish to ask questions, raise hand. And we will first go into any apologies for absence. Sam?
Thank you, Chair. I have apologies from Martin Nichols.
Yeah, Martin is in CMT, so I do understand that. Any to receive disclosures of personal prejudice interest for members? None. Item 3, into the minutes of the last meeting.
Move.
Oh, I was going to say for accuracy, that's brilliant. And
Second.
then we'll go on to item 4, economy and recovery plan. Phil?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, can I start by just thanking Paul, Ralph and Claire James and the team for all the work that they've done on this action plan. It's been, as we all know, it's been a difficult period in terms of, Swansea and its economy over the last few months, and that's probably understating it. We produced this action plan, and the first time we discussed it with you was back in November last year. It was very much draft at that stage. It's still draft, although it is significantly enhanced since that previous version you saw. We've refined it, and we've also started the delivery aspects as well. So there's lots of actions that have either been completed or have commenced or are in the pipeline. So I just wanted to say that at the start. It's not the council's action plan. It's very much a partnership action plan that we've developed with the Regeneration Swansea Partnership. So there's lots of stakeholders involved in this, and obviously that's what we need if we are to address the economic challenges going forward. It's very much a partnership approach. I also wanted to stress as well that it's not a record of everything that we're doing in terms of economic development and regeneration. It really is only the sort of additional actions that we've identified with the Regeneration Swansea Partnership that we need to address the COVID issues right now. So how do we support businesses? How do we support individuals? How do we improve the resilience of the economy as well going forward? So it's an action plan that complements the programs and projects that we were already delivering before COVID, and it's drawing in funding and resources from all the partners, whether that's the council itself or Welsh Government or other partners around the table. I'd also like to say as well that this recovery plan doesn't stand alone. It is very much part of the council's wider response to COVID as well. So it sits within that sort of wider framework. I wasn't going to go through the plan line by line because there's so much of it there. I was just going to give you some headlines, if that's okay, in terms of perhaps some of the main progress that we've made since that discussion back in November last year. So in terms of some of the sort of the highlights, we've actually secured £1 million of Welsh Government Transforming Towns grant funding, and we've not just secured it, but we've allocated it to businesses. So through things like the premises outdoor adaptations grant. So that was really important just after the first lockdown, when we wanted to get some of those premises back into business, but we had to maintain the social distancing requirements. So that's been very successful, very good take up from business there. We've also continued to administer the Welsh Government financial support in its various guises, whether it's the fire break discretionary grant or the restrictions grant, the cultural freelancer grant, so the startup grant. There's so many of them, and that's been a huge area of work for the team. It's required us to put in some long hours in terms of administering those grants and dealing with businesses, but it's had to be done, and in fairness, the team have really stepped up to support the economy over the last few months. We've also just recruited some new business development officers as well. So that's going to give us another string to our bow in terms of our startup advice and enterprise service. And I think that's really going to come into its own as we come out of this COVID crisis. We launched a county-wide shop local, shop Swansea campaign. That was back in November. That's been very successful, and we will continue to run with that. We've had a Kickstart bid approved by UK government, and there's some internal and external work placements that have been set up. That scheme is now live. And we've also had some initial budget confirmed as well for some small startup bursaries to help some business starts and people who want to get into self-employment. So I think, again, that's another key area for us in terms of helping address some of the unemployment issues that obviously we've discovered over the last few months. We've at a strategic level as well, what we've done is we've led the commissioning of a new regional economic delivery plan for South West Wales. So this plan will guide our economy, say, over the next 10 to 15 years. It's been developed with our partners across the region and also Welsh Government as well. So this will very much be the strategic sort of direction of travel for our economy. And that work has just started. So we've just completed the sort of the economic assessment of the issues. And over the next few months, we'll be putting that delivery plan in place. And we're hoping to have that all done by May, maybe June this year. And we also, continue to support other sectors, tourism, cultural sectors, in whichever way we can, working with other departments right across the council and our partners in Welsh Government as well. So before, I'm sure there are questions, before any questions, I just want to say that, this recovery plan, it continues to evolve. It's very much, as far as I'm concerned, a live response to the crisis. The circumstances will continue to change, I'm sure. So it has to be a flexible document that responds to those challenges, but also the opportunities as well, which will come out of this crisis. There are things that we've seen, things like shop local, which I think will be a strength for us as we move forward. So really the purpose of this strategy, this action plan, is to help address those issues, but also respond to those opportunities. Paul Ralph is with us. He was with us, but he's had a very detailed involvement in this action plan. So if there's any questions, I'm sure myself or Paul would be able to respond to those. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Phil. And I too would like to thank every member of staff who's been involved in all this. It's over this COVID time, the work must have been extremely difficult. So I would like to, on behalf of the members, thank you all for your hard work. And we'll go into a question time. Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. 2 points, Phil. Funny enough, I've had an inquiry from a constituent regarding cause of younger people losing their jobs through COVID, and some of the main retail stores obviously indicating that they no longer will be in business. What measures have we put in place regarding apprenticeships or creating employment opportunities if we get new sort of businesses that come into the city? And the second point, you mentioned about the regional working with partners, and hopefully this is going to be rolling out and moving forward. Are we going to have a monitoring progress on how this is actually working?
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I'll let Paul come in on the first question, because we already have significant provision in place, things like beyond bricks and mortar. We do have apprenticeship program as well, and now the Kickstart program. I'll let Paul elaborate on that. But in terms of the second question, in terms of regional working, what I envisage there is throughout the next couple of months, we will be developing, first of all, a sort of strategic vision and framework for the region going forward, and then that will be underpinned by this delivery plan. And the delivery plan then is really owned by ourselves and Neath Talbot and Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire, and also Welsh Government. And there will certainly be a monitoring framework attached to that delivery plan. So we'll be able to set out our stall in terms of the key interventions, what do we want to achieve and by when, and then attach some performance measures against that to see how we're doing moving forward. Again, like it's, if you like, it's almost a strategic version of this sort of response, this action plan that we've got now. I see it as, quite a dynamic process, because the one thing we've learned about the economy over the last 12 months is that things can change very quickly. And so we can't really be too rigid. So yes, we'll have a framework, we'll have an action plan, but I'd like to think that there'll be some flexibility built in that as well, so we can respond to the challenges and the opportunities as they arise. But I'll let Paul come in now on the first point.
Yeah, sure. So good, very good question, Councillor White. So the Kickstart programme that Phil referenced in the headlines, that's one of the means we're able to use. We applied for 100 placements initially through that programme. We've managed to sort of source over 100 placements across the private sector with local employers. So we've got the initial bid, we've had 69 places funded. And we're hoping to secure a further 22, but it is a rolling programme, so we will continue to bid to that. And we're also looking at internal placements within the council, and that is targeted at 16 to 24-year-olds. We also look to, whatever other programmes we've got currently running, the likes of Communities for Work, etc. We'll use those vehicles as well. And also the startup bursaries Phil referred to, we're working with the poverty team there to secure those. And the business development posts that we're putting in place will be available as well to advise. We're also talking to Welsh governments at regional level about other ways we may be able to, implement further such supports in the coming months. And trying to influence the design of programmes going forward as well to get more support into the startup sort of part of the world, if that makes sense. Hope that answers the question.
That's good. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Phil Downing, you got questions?
Chair, can I interrupt? Sorry, I've
Yes.
realised when Phil was going through this, they should have declared an interest. I think it's personal interest. My sister owns a shop in Oxford Street. So I don't know whether it's prejudicial under this report or just personal.
Okay, I'm sure Sam can come back on us with that as a personal.
Yes, yeah, Chair, that is a personal interest, so I'll record it as that.
There we are. Is that all right, Jim?
Thanks.
Good.
Yes. Thanks.
Okay, Phil?
Yeah, start off with when you're talking about the Transforming Town grant. I thought that was recycled money. It was interest-free loans, and then when it's paid back, it's used again. But I think you said that from that Transforming Towns was the Premises Outdoor Adaptation Grant, which means that was a grant and it doesn't get paid back. So have I got it wrong, or?
Can I jump in, Chair? So Transforming Towns is now the banner for all the Welsh Government regeneration programmes. So there are several things which sit within that. One is the Town Centre Loan Fund, which is, as you say, Councillor, a zero interest loan. That's one tool we've got available. Then we also have what's called Property Enhancement Development Grant and Sustainable Living Grants, which are for new commercial space and homes above shops. That's a separate pot, but we actually had money added to that from regional underspend to help us create the outdoor adaptations grants within the property enhancement grant. So there is a difference there. They are separate budgets. We have recently secured a further £5 million worth of town centre loan for the private sector, so primarily city centre based. But we were given permission to go beyond the city centre with the outdoor adaptations grant. I think something like 230 businesses have benefited from that cross county.
So, just following on, so that Transforming Towns, that's still alive?
Yes.
It's not. What about the outdoor adaptations? Is that closed?
It's closed at the moment. Yeah, we've I think the budget we managed to secure in the end, pooling underspends from the region was in the region of 1.2, 1.4 million, with an average of about £6,000 per allocation. And that's basically all the award letters have gone out for that now, and the claims are coming in basically from the businesses. So it's fully allocated at the moment, but we're hoping to see a new scheme from the 1st of April that will enable us to restart that process in the new financial year.
Just something that came to me there. What happens if somebody doesn't take up their grant? What happens to that grant then? It would
go back into the property enhancement development grant pot, basically. So we do tend to slightly overcommit to make sure that the funds are maximised, because that's the game we're in. We have to make sure that we utilise all the funds available within year. So we try our absolute best to make sure everything gets used.
Yeah, because I think one thing that I'm concerned about is in the outlying towns that a lot of shops closing there due to the pandemic, and we sort of losing out on the outlying towns. But to follow up from that, that's something that this Transforming Towns could help. If we were going to put a grant in for Transforming Towns, does it have to be by the person that owns the shop, or I'm thinking of a town or community council? Could they do something on their behalf? That's one question.
Yeah.
So that's easy answer, that one. And then if I could go back to the Kickstart, if a business applied to the Kickstart for an apprentice, would that funding cover the 3 or 4 years of that apprenticeship?
That's a good question. I'll have to. I'm just looking at the detail now to see if 25 hours a week. I'm not sure. It's 6-month placements for what I can see, councillor. So it's relatively short-term funding. It would only. It's just to tide people over. To keep them in post as long as possible, I guess, is the thing. The funding doesn't extend, but then there will be opportunities to reapply. So I guess you could potentially have more than one application going through.
It's not apprenticeships then.
It's more sort of job placements. So It's not an apprenticeship as such. It's more about actually being in a 6-month job placement as such.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Peter Jones.
Thank you, Chair. A number of questions and comments, if I may. First of all, I was very interested to read in the paper that Swansea is projected by the end of 2021 to have an 8.1% growth in employment, which of course is very pleasing, and that this apparently places us 6th amongst whatever number of towns and cities were included in the comparison. I'm just wondering, first of all, I'm not quite sure who could answer this, how have we managed this relatively successful employment outcome? I mean, I'm aware, of course, of construction employment in the city centre and maybe projected growth in the hospitality sector. I just wondered if there could be, can someone just explain how we've managed to get to this relatively strong projected employment position?
I think when you see these assessments done by these organisations, obviously they use different criteria. So we'd have to go back to look at the criteria that they used. It is a very pleasing forecast, if you like. I would say, it is a forecast and things can change. Obviously, we could do better or worse. I'd like to think we could do better. I think part of it probably stems from the fact that, we have got quite a a strong representation from the public sector in Swansea. You know, it's getting up there towards I think 37% of our economy is public sector, and I suppose what that does, it does give us resilience, especially during this COVID crisis. We are also a very service sector dominated economy now as well. So, you know, we have a far lower percentage of manufacturing jobs than other parts of the country, which you know is a double-edged sword, because manufacturing jobs are obviously very well paid. And I think there's also a Brexit angle in there as well. I don't think we are as vulnerable to the Brexit scenario as some of the other local authorities in the country, because I don't think you know, we export as much as perhaps some of the other areas, especially those with higher manufacturing contributions to their economy. So there are no doubt a vast variety of things. And then I suppose if the company that's produced this forecast has also looked at the initiatives underway, for instance, our regeneration programme, then they may well have factored that in as well in terms of the growth prospects. For instance, the investment in the city deal and that sort of thing. So it's probably a variety of things, and it's a moment in time as well, isn't it? I suppose that you have to take on board. I don't know if Paul had anything to add to that.
Thank you, Phil. I guess it might include people coming back off furlough. And, you know, I mean, they presumably are technically, I'm not quite sure whether they're counted as employed or not at the moment.
They would be still classed as employed, councillor.
Okay, so it wouldn't include.
I think it's as well there's significant provision being developed. This, as the report says, we're accelerating the journey we were already on in a way in the transformation of the economy. And I guess, you know, Swansea is relatively successful at certainly in the, you know, the universities, the IT sector, and I guess, you know, a lot of the office provision, co-working spaces is about retention of those individuals in our local economy, as opposed to going to Cardiff, Bristol or elsewhere, because at the moment the spaces have been limited. So the office provision that's being put in, that's referenced in the plan, is part of that retention, but also sustaining people's jobs through things like the outdoor grant scheme. You can't underestimate the effect that has on those businesses and their ability to retain staff, which otherwise they wouldn't be able to do, because they'd have had to, you know, they'd be trading at a much lower level. There are some tangible examples there.
I've got a different question, if I may now, Chair. In the section local food aims in the long appendix, I was interested to read that looking at areas of land that might be used for commercial allotments. I know in the past, speaking personally, trying to get an allotment for myself as a private individual, that's incredibly difficult. There's a shortage of space in relation to personal allotments. Are we now going to suddenly discover we've got spaces after all that we're prepared to make available for commercial allotments? I've got no problem with that, that's correct. We can see the desirability of that. But does that also mean we could find some land for personal allotments?
It's an interesting question.
Sorry if I landed some of either of you in it, sorry.
I think, I mean, that certainly Vicky in my team who works on rural development in particular, you know, she's looking at all options, and you know, that there's through the Swansea Food Partnership as well, you know, there's a lot of work going on trying to look at all angles. So I guess it's an area for exploration, and something that we got to look at all options, really, I think, is the point Phil was making at the outset. So it's one thing on the list. I'd have to explore further detail for you, but you know, we can do that.
I'd be grateful, yes, thank you.
Sure.
And then further, if I may, Chair, under the tourism aims section of Appendix A, there's a curious unexplained algorithm, potential on investment. POI equals CU times CI times MQ, but the components making up the algorithm is going to put somebody on the spot, are not spelled out. I was just puzzled as to quite what those components are and what the utility of it might be.
I think we'd have to come back to you on that one. I think colleagues in tourism more au fait with that one, and that's where that's come from. So I'm sure that makes a lot more sense to them than it does to us. But
Doesn't make any sense to me, Phil. But
we'll come back. Yeah, whenever you see algorithms, unless it's very simple, I'm sure there's much more to it. We'll come back to you on that.
I'll be grateful. And then finally, it really is finally, Chair, if I may. The discussion about district centres, district commercial centres, shopping centres. I'm just wondering, and I noticed there's a pilot worker going in Morriston, and I think another location. I think it would be interesting for this committee if we could have a report on all district centres across Swansea, what the state of play in relation to each might be, and what their potential for development might be, contributing to the overall employment and regeneration recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So the work in Morriston is it's a heritage-led sort of element linked to the Copperworks. Really was the rationale there initially, but within the team we have started looking at a broader action plan that takes in all the districts, and really the work in Morriston is kind of intended as a scoping pilot, and we've done a little bit also in Pontyddulais and Clydach through Valley's Task Force funding opportunistically, but there will be an opportunity to look at that further. So I mean there's a detailed action plan that we've trialled in Morriston, and many of those actions are now nearing completion, and it's given us a feel for what costs might be involved and that kind of thing. So yeah, we can certainly look at that, Councillor, no problem.
Certainly had in mind, it might be good at some point in the future, Chair, if this committee could have a report across these sort of district centres in Swansea as to quite what the development potential might be. Well, thank you, Chair. Thank you for bearing with me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Paul. Mike White wants to come back in.
Yes, please, Chair. Yeah, in my day, perhaps, Paul. Yeah, about 4 years ago, Paul, we had done a scrutiny working panel on allotments, and we did visit a few of the sites around the city. One in Llansamlet, the one in Gorse Avenue, another one I gather, I'm not sure, but there were a few sites that we visited. Or one in Sketty Park, and the panel did put forward some recommendations. Now, whether you could follow that up with your colleagues in scrutiny team to see exactly what were the sort of recommendations within that report at the time.
Okay, yeah. So we could locate the minutes of that meeting, as Sam can help with that. Okay. Yeah, we'll have a look, certainly. I can get Vicky to explore it further then for you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. June, you get your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. On the last matter that Mike raised, I don't know whether you can remember after that the council passed all the allotments over to the allotment society. They now no longer have responsibility for allotments in Swansea. So even if we look at that report, I should imagine the recommendations were for the council and not for the private individuals.
Thanks, Jim. Any more questions? Well, Peter asked two of my questions, one on tourism, and as far as I can see as chair, the officers and the stakeholders are doing quite a lot in the planning. It's nice to see that we are encouraging new entrepreneurs, small businesses going online, tourism, making Swansea a happy, better place to work. I think this is going to be an ongoing, as you know, it's going to be an ongoing plan. So I think if we can fetch this back to PDC in about 3 or 4 months' time to see how we're getting on.
Yeah, we can do regular updates as required, Chair. The next sort of milestone for us is to take the plan to cabinet to get it signed off there. But you know, and then I think, as you say, it's a live document, and it's a case of monitoring progress as we move forward with partners. So whatever interval suits you, we can do that.
Do you know when it's going to go to cabinet, Phil?
I think it's on for next month.
Yeah, March.
Phil Downey wants to come back in.
Yeah, just to follow up on what you were saying, Chair, about having a follow-up report. It would be nice also to know in how many people or how many organisations have taken advantage of the Transforming Towns, the PDG, POAG. I got them all right. They're all written down here. And to see how well we are doing.
Yeah.
It's not good saying we've got them and it was only a few people taking them up. Like I said, with the outdoor adaptation, we may have them all taken up, but if only 50% have actually done the work and used the grant, then it may not be a success. So it would be have a measuring stick the next time as well. We have a report back.
Okay. I'm going to let you come back in once more, Peter, because we're going to go on to the next agenda, mate. You're on mute.
I will be very, very quick. Under the tourism heading, just a reminder, of course, that Scrutiny had a tourism working group exercise about 18 or so months ago and came up with a number of recommendations. And the focus of their report was very much on ecotourism. So I hope that will be borne in mind. I'm sure it will be, but I hope that it will be borne in mind in terms of going forward with developments for employment and so forth in relation to the tourism issue. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say, Chair.
You said an existing hand, June, or you got another question? Okay. Right, sure. Good. We'll go on to the next agenda item then, which is agenda item 5. Paul, I think you're taking this one through.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chair. So this is unashamedly kind of a slimmed down version of the previous item, because really the bulk of the measures described there are really important for this specific part of the city. So, you know, we're trying to pull every lever we can that Welsh Government and internal resources make available to, you know, continue the work to get High Street, you know, as reactivated as possible. But perhaps the landmark one is the Palace Theatre. That you'll be aware of. We're going out to tender for the physical works on the building towards the end of this month, and there's discussions with an end tenant are going extremely well, despite the pandemic. And that building really is the catalyst that's set out in the Swansea Central Area Framework as the catalyst building for Upper High Street, and that's well underway. But as well, I guess it's the raft of other provisions which we've described under the Transforming Towns banner. So there are businesses along High Street that have benefited from the Outdoor Adaptations Grant, but we're also looking at where there are empty spaces such as Davati shops. I was in a meeting just before this talking about, you know, consultation with the community around that, and you've seen a change of use planning application that hit social media end of last week about how we start getting a lot more vibrancy into the street. And it's also about how we link up all the services that are operating, but also start adding alternatives for people living in the area. So things like the startup grants, things like, you know, being able to repurpose the different buildings, and not just residential. Residential is important, but not just residential. How you get, you know, a mix of activity going on, because the palace is it's inside. It's still going to look very much like a theatre. It's still going to have the atrium. You're still going to have that sense of it as a theatre, but it's going to be a you know, a flexible, hopefully a flexible co-working space as part of a pipeline of spaces available across the city in future, where you have places where the smallest business up to, you know, larger businesses plus services like mine, or, you know, other employability services, other agencies can mix and interact with the population, frankly. So things like the Shop Local campaign, all these things are absolutely relevant here, as well as making sure that employability services are accessible. But I guess the thing is getting the balance between all these things, so it's not one thing or the other, that you've got a mix of services available, so that where you do have the very well publicised problems on the streets that are accentuated by lower footfall, that you actually have that mix. When you think of the number of student blocks that are in the vicinity now, that's once the pandemic eases, that's immediately going to change the footfall, the flow from the station towards the Palace Theatre, etc. So it's taking advantage of these new investments to benefit the community, and I think that's it always feels like the forgotten end of the city a lot, particularly Upper High Street. And we've got a massive opportunity now to reverse that and help that, draw that area in to the vibrancy that does actually link down High Street to the arena at the end of the day, and all the developments of Swansea Central Phase 1. So I didn't want to necessarily go through line by line as such, but I guess it's kind of to try and give the reassurance that every opportunity we've got, every lever we've got available at the moment, we are seeking to apply those along the streets, and that there are various sustainable living grants and property enhancement grants. But as I mentioned, we're hoping from the new financial year to start to be able to look at shop fronts specifically and things like that. So where there may be a business in a premises, but it looks terrible, we'd actually be able to address shop fronts, which is more difficult to do currently. So, and not to forget as well, green infrastructure being a vital part of that, and any new proposals are very much taking that into account, and fundamentally actually going with the grain of the community as well and working with them. I hope that makes sense. I've kind of skimmed over it a little bit, but I'm interested in your views.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Yeah, skim through is just as informative as reading it line by line. Any questions? June?
Yeah, this is about the regeneration of High Street. I see nothing in the report, and perhaps it's going to be elsewhere, about the activities of the housing department in Upper High Street, especially around the Devati area. Can that be included in the report to at least show that the council are doing something with the housing in the area?
Yeah, certainly, and we're working very closely with them, particularly around the Devati shops at the moment, and looking with the consultation there. So yeah, certainly we can put more flavour on that. Certainly, yeah.
Thanks, Paul. Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Phil. Interesting. I think Paul touched on what I was going to ask, really, on the actual facades, the frontages of the shops, especially Devati. You come into the gateway into the city centre, coming from west and south, and will they all be also be asked to be all of the same? That probably become something put within the perhaps conditions within the planning consent there, because I tell you what I found is very interesting. By the market in Union Street, the mill shop there, the frontage of that is tremendous, and if that it really looks modern, new, inviting. So perhaps if that could be looked at, especially on that end of the top end of High Street, and of course of the old Lamb pub as well, because that's looking old and tired as well. So if that could be a possibility, Phil.
Yeah,
I think. Well, do you want to pick it up, Paul, or do you want me to?
Yeah, sure. It's, I mean, basically the funding has been a bit limited where you've got an existing business to date, but we've managed to influence the programme to the extent that we'll be allowed from the new financial year to actually where you've got an existing business in a property with a poor shop front, we can actually approach them to look at that. And we're piloting that at the moment on 4 shop fronts in Morriston, which is giving us an idea of costs. And because Morriston is a conservation area as well, it's got that angle on it as well as to what materials are appropriate, how much does that cost, value for money for the business. Because a lot of businesses, I guess, although the shop front is their window to the world, I guess some if funds are tight, it's probably the last thing on their list, isn't it? Whereas it should probably be top. So, and also I guess relying on a bit of one-upmanship, I guess, if we can get some of them done, that others will want to do it as well. And it's fair to say that we can mix the property enhancement grant with town centre loan at zero interest if they're struggling with the match funding, for example, and that's what we're trying to trial in Morriston at the moment, and that's progressing well. So we'll have some worked examples to apply across. Well, it does relate to your district centres question earlier as well, as a committee, but certainly High Street will be on that list.
Thanks, Paul.
I think the only thing I'd add is each of the properties are individual. You know, they've got a unique identity, and that's the sort of the flavour of the area. But for us, it's about the quality and a consistency in terms of the quality. And as Paul mentioned, the materials that are used and the design standards and those sorts of things. So that for us is the trick. Yes, each property will look different and unique, and that will reflect what they're doing in that building, and it needs to. But it's the quality, I think, is what you're getting at, Councillor, in terms of lifting the feel of the place. And I think that's where our input in terms of the design and the materials that can really come to the fore. So.
Absolutely, sure. As I say, that's 99% of the message of showing that we're open for business, and that's the selling factor, really, I think, for those businesses.
Thanks, Mike. Phil down in.
Yeah, we'll have to call Phil home something else because I think I'm having all the questions. This is an example. We've got a shop in High Street. It's been empty for a few years. It's dilapidated. The owner doesn't want to do anything about it. What do we do as a council?
I'll ask Phil to come back. Phil Holmes to come back on that.
I think there's quite a few examples like that. I mean, the difficulty is when you've got a property that's owned by a third party, and perhaps that third party doesn't have really much of a relationship with Swansea. Perhaps it's a property owner in another part of the country. Properties could be owned, and the owner could reside in London or Manchester or whatever. And then when you have that vacant property, it's very difficult. So in the past, what we've tried to do is work with BID so that we can get interaction with those owners. We tried all sorts of things in terms of vinyls on the inside of windows. And we're in discussions now with owners in terms of meanwhile uses to see whether we can, if you can't let the property short term, maybe we can assist in terms of a meanwhile use, and that will help with business rates and that sort of thing. But there still will be owners of properties who just don't want to engage. And Paul and I sat through some training recently with Welsh Government to look at options that may exist to us to try to force the hand of developers using owners, I should say, using powers like CPO powers, those sorts of things. It is a last resort, but where you do have a property that is having a very detrimental impact on the street scene, I think the council needs to look at those powers. And yes, we always try to use the carrot, but sometimes I think you need to use the stick as well. So that approach could well be deployed in the future. I don't know whether Paul wants to comment on that.
I guess one thing to add, from when we spoke to you last about that subject, it's interesting when you actually analyse the ownership of properties on High Street. There's a very small number in that category. Some of them are actually in ownership of the likes, for example, of Coastal, and being prepared for reuse or demolition for replacement. So some of them, although they're unpleasant to look at immediately, in the next couple of years they're likely to come down or be completely renovated. So it's looking at each individual building and its current status, because some of them have got a plan, even though they look. I was quite surprised by that myself, talking to Sally Jones. That they actually there is a plan for quite a large number of them now.
Well, do you want to come back in?
Only just to say, not everybody is amenable. So get the stick ready.
Thanks, Phil. Stu, do you want to come back in because your hand is still up, or is it an old hand?
Was that me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Following on from Phil's question, I think Paul has answered some of it. Do we have any authority to go into these buildings to see what the state of the building is like inside, and if it has any detrimental effect on the adjoining properties?
Yeah, the council does have powers of entry that we do use where there's justified need to do so. So, for instance, I think the planning department, other departments will have these powers as well. So, if there's an enforcement issue, for instance, and we think that there's some say development taking place on a site unauthorized, then we have powers of entry to go into that property, and again, other services within the council have very similar powers, but of course they've got to be justified in terms of use.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay. The recommendations is committee to note and comment on updates and action to be undertaken to encourage more shops and support high street regeneration. Obviously, this is ongoing, Phil. So we'll fetch this back. If we're going to be fetching item 4 back in about May or June, possibly this can come with it as well, because it's virtually the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's see why not.
We will have some concrete updates by then as well.
Yeah.
Not literally concrete. Sorry, just concrete's probably the right word, is it?
I know it is.
They're upset, Peter.
Okay, go on to the next. Is the economy, environment and infrastructure PDC work plan. Sam?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This has been amended.
You're very, very quiet.
Oh, hang on. Is that helping?
That's better.
Right, okay. So this has been amended since our last meeting. It's thoroughly up to date as we speak. When we had our meeting in January, sorry, beg your pardon, all the items that members wanted brought forward for later in the year, I've included on this newly revised work plan. So I'm just going to populate the report authors alongside the topic matters. But as you can see, after consultation with Martin Nichols, we decided that the More Homes, Housing and Decarbonisation Strategy would be the only item on March's agenda, as it was quite a large item. And as a result, then the management and maintenance of open space will be put back to April. So that's the only amendment update really that I need members to be aware of at the moment.
Thank you, Sam. Any questions from the members? I think we can say that's the end of the meeting and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Chair. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Chair.
Yeah, cheers, Phil.
Bye.
John.
Phil, thanks for attending, officers. Sorry.